The morning light filters through impossibly tall windows, catching particles of dust that drift like snow through chambers so vast they seem to swallow sound itself. Somewhere in the distance, a clock chimes 5 times. The air smells of beeswax candles, stale perfume, and the faint mustiness that no amount of incense can quite conceal. You are awake, though you wish you weren't. Outside your door, footsteps echo down marble corridors, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all moving with purpose, while you lie there wondering how you ended up here, trapped in the most magnificent palace ever built, living a life that looks like paradise from the outside, but feels, increasingly, like something else entirely. Before we go further into this gilded labyrinth, I'd love to know, where are you right now as you listen to this? What time is it where you are? Drop a comment and let me know what corner of the world you're hearing this from. And if you enjoy these quiet journeys into history's stranger moments, consider subscribing. There are so many more stories to explore together. This is Versailles in the late 17th century, during the reign of Louis XIV, the Sun King. And if you are among the fortunate few, or perhaps the unfortunate few, depending on how you look at it, who have been granted the privilege of living here, your life is no longer your own. Every moment, from the instant you wake until the moment you finally, mercifully fall asleep, is choreographed, observed, and judged. Your clothing, your posture, the angle at which you hold your head, the number of steps you take, where you stand, how you bow, when you speak, when you remain silent. All of it is dictated by a system of etiquette so complex, so minutely calibrated, that it would take years to master and a lifetime to navigate without error. The palace itself is a character in this story, a living, breathing entity that shapes the lives of everyone within its walls. Versailles is not merely large, it is almost incomprehensibly vast. The main palace building stretches more than 500 meters from end to end. The grounds encompass thousands of acres of meticulously manicured gardens, fountains that require an army of workers to maintain, groves filled with sculptures, artificial lakes, even a miniature village where the queen and her ladies pretend to be shepherdesses when the mood strikes. Inside, there are more than 2,000 rooms, though the exact number depends on how you count them and which year you're asking about, since Louis XIV is constantly building, expanding, renovating, adding more grandeur to what is already the grandest residence on earth. At its peak, somewhere between 10,000 and 20,000 people live and work at Versailles. Not all of them are nobles, of course. Most are servants, craftsmen, administrators, soldiers, gardeners, cooks, cleaners, stable hands, priests, physicians, artists, musicians, and the countless others required to keep this vast machine running. But even among the nobility, there are hundreds of families in residence at any given time, all competing for the same limited resource, the king's attention. Because that is what Versailles is really about. It is not about beauty, though it is staggeringly beautiful. It is not about comfort, though some of its rooms are luxurious beyond imagining. It is about control. Louis XIV has created a system in which the French nobility, once fractious and dangerous, capable of raising private armies and challenging royal authority, has been transformed into something ornamental and harmless. By concentrating the aristocracy at Versailles, by making proximity to the king the only currency that matters, by turning every interaction into a ritual and every ritual into an opportunity to demonstrate favor or withhold it, Louis has built a cage so seductive that his prisoners beg to be locked inside. Let us imagine, then, that you are one of these prisoners. Perhaps you are a duke or duchess, someone whose family has served the crown for generations. Perhaps you are a newer arrival, someone whose wealth or marriage or military service has earned you a place at court. It doesn't matter much. Once you are here, the rules are the same for everyone, though the king, naturally, stands outside and above them all. Your day begins earlier than you would like. If you are a woman of high rank, your servants wake you before dawn. If you are a man, possibly even earlier, especially if you hope to attend the lever, the king's ceremonial rising, which is the most important event of the morning and one of the most sought-after privileges at Versailles. But we'll return to that. For now, you are in your own apartments, such as they are. This is the first disappointment of Versailles, and one that shocks nearly everyone who arrives here expecting luxury. Unless you are a member of the royal family or one of the highest-ranking nobles in France, your accommodations are likely to be cramped, dark, and uncomfortable. The palace's grand state apartments, the rooms that visitors see, the chambers that appear in paintings and engravings, are magnificent beyond description. But those are public spaces. The private apartments, the places where people actually live, are often little more than subdivided closets carved out of leftover space. You might share a single room with your spouse and children. You might have a narrow garret under the eaves, stifling in summer and freezing in winter. You might have windows that overlook a courtyard filled with garbage and human waste, because Versailles, for all its splendor, has no sewage system to speak of. The courtyards, the gardens, the corridors, the corners of staircases, all of them are used as improvised latrines by the thousands of people who live here. The smell, particularly in summer, is notorious. Visitors from foreign courts, arriving at Versailles expecting opulence, often comment in their letters home about the stench. But you are awake now, and there is no time to dwell on discomfort. Your servants help you dress, and this is not a simple process. Clothing in the late 17th century is complex, layered, and designed not for comfort, but for display. If you are a woman, you begin with the chemise, a linen undergarment. Over this goes a corset, laced tightly to create the fashionable silhouette of the era. A rigid, upright posture, a tiny waist, shoulders pressed back. The corset is reinforced with wood or whalebone. It is difficult to breathe deeply while wearing one, difficult to bend, difficult to sit comfortably. Then come petticoats, several of them, each adding volume and weight. Then the gown itself, heavy brocade or silk, often embroidered or decorated with ribbons, lace, and jewels. The sleeves are elaborate, the neckline carefully calibrated to current fashion. Then stockings, shoes with heels that make walking on marble floors treacherous. Gloves, a fan, jewelry, and finally, the most important element, your hair. Hairstyles at Versailles are not merely decorative, they are statements. Women's hair is piled high on the head, held in place with pins, wireframes, and pomade made from animal fat. The construction can take hours. It is adorned with ribbons, feathers, flowers, jewels, even small figurines or model ships, depending on the current fashion. Once completed, the hairstyle is so elaborate and so fragile that women often sleep sitting up or on special pillows to avoid disturbing it. It might last several days, during which time it cannot be washed. The pomade, made from lard or beef tallow, begins to smell. It attracts insects. Women carry small sticks with them, delicate ivory or silver implements, which they use to scratch their scalps through the architecture of their hair. If you are a man, the process is somewhat less elaborate, but still time-consuming. You begin with a shirt, linen, or silk. Over this, a waistcoat, often richly embroidered. Then a justaucorps, a long coat that reaches the knees, with wide cuffs and rows of buttons, many of them decorative and non-functional. Breeches, stockings, shoes with high red heels if you are of sufficient rank. Red heels are a privilege reserved for those who have been presented to the king. A cravat, carefully tied, and then, most importantly, your wig. Men at Versailles do not wear their own hair. They wear enormous curled wigs, powdered white or grey, that cascade down past the shoulders. These wigs are hot, heavy, and expensive. They must be maintained by professional wig makers, cleaned, curled, and powdered regularly. Beneath the wig, your own hair is cropped short or shaved entirely. The wig smells of powder and sweat, and the various pomades used to style it. It itches. You cannot remove it in public. Once dressed, you are ready to enter the day. Though ready is perhaps too strong a word. You are armoured, costumed, prepared to step onto a stage where every moment is a performance. If you are male and of sufficient rank, your first goal is to attend the lever, the King's Rising. This is not a casual event. It is a ceremony, one of the many rituals that Louis XIV has established to regulate and control the lives of his courtiers. The lever takes place in the king's bedchamber, and only a select group is permitted to attend. There are different levels of entry, each corresponding to a different degree of intimacy with the monarch. The first group to enter is the royal family, the king's sons, brothers, nephews, and legitimate male relatives. Then come the princes of the blood, men whose lineage connects them to the royal line. Then high-ranking officers and nobles who hold specific honours. The entrances are staggered, each group arriving at a precisely choreographed moment. If you are invited to attend the lever, it is a sign of favour, a mark that you are valued, or at least noticed. If you are not invited, or if you are invited and fail to attend, it is noted. Everything at Versailles is noted. You arrive at the king's apartments in the early morning darkness. The corridors are crowded with other courtiers, all moving in the same direction, all dressed in their finest clothes. There is very little conversation. People are tired, cold, anxious. You wait outside the chamber doors until your group is called. When the doors open, you enter quietly, careful not to make noise, careful to bow at precisely the right depth, careful to position yourself where you can see the king, but not presume to stand too close. Louis XIV is in his bed, or rather, he is in the state bed, an enormous canopied structure more like a throne than a sleeping place. He has, in fact, already been awake for some time. His actual sleep takes place in a smaller, more comfortable bed in an adjoining room. But the state bed is where the ceremony occurs. The king is surrounded by attendants, his first valet, his doctor, his wig maker, others whose specific roles are defined by centuries of tradition. The curtains of the bed are drawn back. The king sits up. Holy water is brought and blessed. The king makes the sign of the cross. His wig is brought forth on a cushion, yes, a cushion, carried with the solemnity usually reserved for crown jewels, and carefully placed on his head. His dressing gown is removed and his shirt changed, not by just anyone, but by whoever holds the honoured position of doing so, a role that might be competed over by grown men of distinguished lineage. Every action is slow, deliberate, ritualized. You watch in silence. The entire event might take an hour or more, and at the end of it, you bow and withdraw, having accomplished nothing more than being present, being seen, existing for a moment in the orbit of the Sun King. But this is the point. Attendance at the lever is not about utility. It is about demonstrating loyalty, submission, and your willingness to structure your entire life around the king's schedule. After the lever, assuming you were fortunate enough to attend, you might hope for breakfast. But food at Versailles is more complicated than you might expect. For the nobility, there is no communal dining hall, no convenient cafeteria. Meals are taken in private apartments, if you are wealthy enough to afford them. This means maintaining your own kitchen staff, purchasing your own food, arranging your own table. It is expensive. Many courtiers, even those of relatively high rank, cannot afford to eat well. They survive on bread, cheese, and whatever cheap wine they can procure. They put on their finest clothes, their jewels and silks and powdered wigs, and they go hungry. There are occasional opportunities to eat at the king's expense. Sometimes, after a hunt or a particular ceremony, food is served. But these meals are also ritualized, governed by rules about who may sit, who must stand, who may eat from which dishes, and in what order. If you are not of sufficiently high rank, you might be permitted to watch the king eat, standing at a respectful distance, stomach growling, while he works his way through course after course of roasted meats, delicate pastries, and elaborate sauces. The king's own meals are public events. Dinner, the main meal of the day, typically taken in the early afternoon, is served with ceremony. Louis XIV dines alone, or rather, he is the only one eating, though he is surrounded by observers. He sits at a table in his apartments. Courtiers crowd into the room, filling every available space, watching in silence as the king eats. Dishes are brought from the kitchens, which are located far from the dining room, so far that the food often arrives cold. The king seems not to notice or care. He has an enormous appetite. He consumes vast quantities of food, whole fowls, multiple cuts of meat, soups, salads, fruits, sweets. He eats with his hands, as is customary, though with a certain elegance. He wipes his fingers on bread, which is then discarded. Between courses, servants bring bowls of water for rinsing. If the king speaks to you during the meal, it is a moment of tremendous importance. You must respond clearly but briefly, deferentially, never presumptuously. If he offers you a bite of food, it is an honor so great that you will speak of it for years. But mostly, you stand and watch, and you wait for the meal to end so that you can return to your own apartments and, if you are lucky, eat something yourself. After the king's dinner, the day opens up somewhat, though opens up is a relative term. There are activities, entertainments, obligations. If the weather is good, there might be a hunt. Louis XIV is passionate about hunting, and participation is strongly encouraged for men of the court. The hunts are elaborate affairs, involving hundreds of beaters, packs of hounds, carefully managed forests stocked with game. You ride for hours, often through difficult terrain, trying to keep up with the king, trying not to fall or make a fool of yourself. The physical exertion is considerable, especially if you are not accustomed to it, and many courtiers are not. They are men who spend most of their time indoors, standing in corridors, and suddenly they are expected to ride hard for half a day. If you are a woman or a man not included in the hunt, you might walk in the gardens. But even this is not as simple as it sounds. The gardens at Versailles are magnificent, designed by André Le Nôtre, the greatest landscape architect of the age. They stretch for miles, filled with geometrically precise flower beds, avenues of trees, fountains, sculptures, hidden groves. But they are also public, at least for the courtiers, and walking in them is another form of performance. You must be seen, but you must not draw inappropriate attention. You must dress perfectly. You must walk with the correct posture, the correct companions. If you are a woman, you cannot walk alone. It would be scandalous. You must always be accompanied by a servant at minimum, preferably by another woman of equal rank or by a male relative. The gardens are also not comfortable. The paths are gravel, difficult to walk on in the heeled shoes that are required. In summer, there is little shade, and the sun beats down on you in your heavy clothing, your corset, your layers of fabric, and your wig, or your towering hair. In winter, the gardens are windswept and freezing, but you still must go because everyone else is going, and to remain in your apartments is to risk being forgotten. Fountains are a source of particular frustration. Versailles is famous for its fountains, hundreds of them, elaborate displays of water, sculpture, and engineering. But there is not enough water pressure to run them all at once, so they are turned on in sections, only when the king is expected to pass by. Teams of workers follow the king's movements through the gardens, running ahead to turn on the fountains before he arrives, and turning them off again after he passes. If you are walking in a part of the garden where the fountains are off, they sit there, dry and silent, the statues looking vaguely forlorn. It is one of the many ways in which Versailles is an illusion, a stage set that only comes to life in the king's presence. At some point in the afternoon, there are usually entertainments. Louis XIV is a great patron of the arts, and Versailles attracts the finest musicians, playwrights, actors, and dancers in Europe. There are concerts, operas, ballets, plays. Molière performs here, so does Lully, the king's favourite composer. Racine writes tragedies that are staged in the palace theatres. These are not minor productions. They are elaborate, expensive, spectacular. But attending them is, once again, governed by rules. Where you sit depends on your rank. The king and the royal family have the best seats naturally. High-ranking nobles sit close to them. Everyone else is arranged in a careful hierarchy that reflects their position at court. If you are seated far from the king, it is a message. If you are not invited at all, it is a stronger message. And you must attend, even if you have no interest in the performance, even if you are exhausted, even if you would rather be anywhere else. Because not attending is noticed, and being noticed for the wrong reasons can be devastating. The performances themselves can be quite long. Operas might last 4 or 5 hours. Ballets, even longer. There are no intermissions in the modern sense, though there are pauses during which servants circulate with wine and refreshments, but only for those of sufficient rank. You sit or stand if there are not enough seats for someone of your status, and you watch and you applaud at the appropriate moments. and you make sure your face shows the correct level of appreciation. If the king laughs, you laugh. If he seems moved, you seem moved. Your reactions are observed and remembered. As the afternoon turns into evening, there is a brief window during which you might return to your apartments and rest. But this window is very brief, and it is often consumed by practicalities. You might need to change clothes because evening attire is different from daytime attire. You might need to attend to correspondence because even at Versailles, life goes on. You have estates elsewhere, responsibilities, family matters. But these things must be managed from a distance, squeezed into the margins of a schedule that is not your own. You might also need to scheme, because life at Versailles is not merely about following rules and attending ceremonies. It is about advancement, about competition, about securing favors, positions, pensions, and privileges. Everyone wants something from the king: a military commission for a son, a profitable appointment for a brother, a marriage alliance, a pardon for some offense, a grant of money because the costs of living at Versailles are ruinous and many noble families are deeply in debt. But you cannot simply ask for these things directly. That would be vulgar. Instead, you must navigate a complex social network, cultivating relationships, trading favors, gathering information, finding someone who has the king's ear, and persuading them to advocate on your behalf. This requires time, energy, and careful attention. You must know who is in favor and who is not. You must track the shifting alliances and rivalries among the great noble families. You must be aware of gossip, because gossip at Versailles is a weapon. A well-placed rumor can destroy a reputation. A careless word, overheard by the wrong person, can end a career. There are informants everywhere, people who report to the king or his ministers about what is being said and done. Trust is rare. Friendship, in the genuine sense, is rarer still. As evening deepens, there is the apartment, one of the regular social gatherings that the king hosts. These take place several evenings a week in the state apartments, and attendance is expected. The apartment is less formal than the daytime ceremonies. There is music, card games, billiards, refreshments. People move between the rooms, conversing, gambling, dancing. It is meant to be a relaxation, a time when the court can enjoy itself. But even here, the rules apply. You must dress appropriately. You must behave appropriately. You must be seen, because the king circulates through the rooms, and if he speaks to you, it is an opportunity. If he does not, you wonder why. The card games can be ruinous. Gambling is one of the few entertainments at Versailles that breaks up the monotony, and people throw themselves into it with desperation. Fortunes are won and lost in a single evening. People play on credit, borrowing money they do not have, promising to pay debts they cannot afford. Some nobles lose everything: estates, titles, family heirlooms, at the card tables. But they keep playing because everyone else is playing, and to abstain is to seem prudish or poor, neither of which is acceptable. If you are lucky or careful, you avoid heavy gambling and instead spend the apartment trying to make useful connections, conversing with people who might help you, being seen by those who matter. But this is exhausting in its own way. Every conversation is a negotiation. Every smile hides calculation. You can never fully relax, never let your guard down. The evening also includes supper, a lighter meal than dinner, but still an occasion. Once again, there are rules about who eats with whom, where, and how. The king might sup privately, or he might sup in public, and if it is the latter, there is another crowd of observers, another ritual to endure. After supper, there might be more entertainment, another play, a ball, a concert. Balls at Versailles are legendary. The Great Gallery, later known as the Hall of Mirrors, is illuminated with thousands of candles. Musicians play from a raised platform. Courtiers dance, moving through the intricate steps of minuets, gavottes, and other formal dances of the period. Dancing is not a casual skill at Versailles, it is a required competence. Everyone must know the dances, must perform them with grace, must follow the patterns without error. Dancing masters are employed to teach courtiers, and children begin learning at an early age. If you do not dance well, it is noticed. If you refuse to dance, it is also noticed. And the dances are demanding. They require coordination, stamina, and memory. The steps are complex, the formations precise. You must bow at the right moments, turn at the right angles, never lose count of the beats. And you must do all of this while maintaining an expression of serene enjoyment, as if it is effortless. Louis XIV himself is an excellent dancer. He loves to perform and has danced in court ballets throughout his life. Even as he ages, he watches the dancing carefully, and he has strong opinions about who dances well and who does not. At last, usually close to midnight or even later, the court day begins to wind down. But it is not over. There is still the coucher, the king's ceremonial going to bed, which is the mirror image of the morning's lever. Once again, only a select group is invited to attend. Once again, there are different levels of entry, different degrees of proximity. Once again, you crowd into the royal bedchamber and watch as the king is undressed, layer by his attendants. His wig is removed, his clothes are taken away, his nightshirt is brought forth. Holy water is blessed. The king makes the sign of the cross. The curtains of the state bed are closed, and it is done. You withdraw, bow, and make your way back through the darkened corridors to your own apartments. It is late, you are exhausted, and you must do it all again tomorrow. But we have only scratched the surface of what makes life at Versailles so suffocating. Let us look more closely at some of the specific mechanisms of control, the particular torments that the system inflicts on those trapped within it. First, there is the matter of space and privacy, or rather, the complete lack thereof. Versailles is crowded beyond imagining. Thousands of people live in a building that, for all its size, was never designed to house them all comfortably. Rooms are subdivided. Corridors are lined with makeshift lodgings. Attics and basements are converted into living quarters. If you are fortunate enough to have an apartment of any size, you likely share it not only with your family but with servants, and possibly with relatives or dependents who have nowhere else to go. Privacy, as a concept, barely exists. Doors are rarely locked. People come and go constantly. Servants, officials, visitors, messengers, all of them have access to your rooms. Even the king himself might arrive unannounced, which is both a great honor and a source of perpetual anxiety. Your belongings are not secure. Theft is common, despite the severe punishments for being caught. Letters are opened and read by the king's agents. Conversations are overheard. There are hidden passages in the palace, small doorways and staircases that allow people to move unseen, and it is widely believed that the king uses these to spy on his courtiers. The lack of privacy extends to the most intimate aspects of life. Bedrooms are not private spaces. If you are a woman of high rank, you might receive visitors while still in bed in the morning, a practice called holding a levee of your own, though on a smaller scale than the king's. You sit propped up with pillows, dressed in an elaborate bed jacket, while friends, relatives, and supplicants come to talk, share news, or ask for favors. It is expected, a part of social life. Even more intimate moments are not truly private. Childbirth, for example, is a public event for royal and high-ranking women. When a royal princess goes into labor, the room is filled with witnesses, doctors, midwives, officials, members of the court who have the right to be present to verify that the child is legitimate. The Dauphine, the king's daughter-in-law, gives birth in a room so crowded that she nearly suffocates from lack of air. Women scream and labor while dozens of people watch. It is horrifying, but it is the system. Bathing is infrequent, and when it does occur, it is often a social event. The court's attitude toward bathing is complex. Water is sometimes viewed with suspicion, thought to open the pores and allow diseases to enter the body. Many courtiers go weeks or even months without a full bath. Instead, they rely on perfume, powder, and frequent changes of linen to mask the odors of unwashed skin. When baths are taken, they are often elaborate affairs, with the bather reclining in a tub, while friends or servants come and go, conversation continuing as if nothing unusual is happening. The lack of basic sanitation is one of the most shocking aspects of daily life at Versailles. There are very few toilets in the modern sense. Chamber pots are used in private rooms, and servants carry them away to be emptied. But there are not enough servants for the number of people, and the waste has to go somewhere. Courtyards, stairwells, corners of corridors, all of them are used as makeshift latrines. The palace employs teams of workers whose sole job is to clean up after the courtiers, but they cannot keep up. The smell is pervasive, particularly in summer. Visitors describe it as overwhelming. Perfume is used liberally, not just for luxury, but out of necessity, to mask the stench of thousands of people living in close quarters without adequate facilities. The gardens, too, are not immune. Despite their beauty, they are also used as outdoor bathrooms by courtiers who cannot make it back to their apartments or who simply prefer not to try. Hidden corners of the groves, behind hedges and statues, become unofficial latrines. The smell, again, is notable. Orders are periodically issued, commanding courtiers not to relieve themselves in the gardens, but these orders are ignored. Disease is a constant presence. With so many people living in such close quarters, with poor sanitation and limited hygiene, illnesses spread rapidly. Smallpox is a recurring nightmare, killing and disfiguring people of all ranks. Measles, typhus, fevers of various kinds, all of them tear through the court periodically. The king himself survives several serious illnesses, including a near-fatal bout of typhoid fever. Doctors are plentiful at Versailles, but their treatments are often useless or actively harmful. Bloodletting, purges, enemas, these are the standard remedies, and they weaken patients as often as they help them. Childbirth is especially dangerous. Women die in labor with grim regularity, and infant mortality is staggeringly high. Even in the royal family, many children do not survive their first year. The Dauphine loses multiple children. The king's own offspring, for all the care and attention they receive, are not immune to the diseases and complications that kill so many. Death, in general, is much closer at Versailles than we are used to in the modern world. It is not hidden away or medicalized. People die in their apartments, attended by family and priests. Bodies are laid out, waked, mourned. Funerals are public events, with elaborate ceremonies depending on the rank of the deceased. And then life goes on. There is no time for extended grieving, not when the court schedule continues, when ceremonies must be attended, when the competition for favor never stops. Now let us talk about the clothing in more detail, because it is one of the most tangible forms of suffering at Versailles, and one that is constant. Fashion in the late 17th century is not about comfort, it is about display, about signaling wealth, taste, and status. The clothing is heavy, restrictive, and expensive. Fabrics are rich: silk, brocade, velvet, lace, but they are also stiff and unyielding. Garments are designed to create a specific silhouette, which means they must be structured, boned, padded, and sewn in ways that contort the body beneath. For women, the corset is the foundation of everything. It is laced so tightly that breathing becomes shallow. Deep breaths are impossible. Bending at the waist is impossible. You learn to move differently, to sit carefully, to pick things up by bending at the knees, keeping your torso rigid. The corset presses against your ribs, your stomach, your internal organs. Women faint regularly, not from delicate feminine vapors, but from lack of oxygen and compression of the diaphragm. Over the corset go layers of petticoats. These add volume to the skirt, creating the wide bell-like shape that is fashionable. The petticoats are heavy, especially if they are made of rich fabrics, or if they are stiffened with horsehair or other materials. By the time you add the actual gown on top, you are carrying an enormous weight. Walking is tiring. Stairs are a challenge. In summer, the heat beneath all those layers is stifling. Women sweat profusely, but the sweat cannot evaporate because the clothing is so heavy and so tightly fitted. The smell of perspiration mixes with the perfume and pomade, creating a scent that is distinctive and not entirely pleasant. The gowns themselves are works of art, but they are also instruments of torture. Sleeves are often so tight that you cannot fully extend your arms. Necklines are cut low, and the corset pushes the breasts up and together in a way that is considered attractive, but is also uncomfortable and sometimes painful. The fabric of the gown is often embroidered or decorated with jewels, which adds even more weight. And the gown must be perfect. Any stain, any tear, any sign of wear is unacceptable. But the gowns are expensive, and most courtiers cannot afford to replace them often, so they are worn carefully, obsessively maintained, mended and cleaned as best as possible. Shoes are another torment. High heels are fashionable for both men and women, though women's heels tend to be higher. The heels are not comfortable. They are narrow, often made of wood covered in leather or fabric, and they make walking on the marble and parquet floors of Versailles treacherous. Women slip and fall, twist ankles, develop blisters and sores. But they wear the shoes anyway because fashion demands it. For men, the situation is somewhat less painful, but no less ridiculous. The justaucorps, the long coat, is heavy and hot. It is made of thick fabric, often wool or velvet, and it falls to the knees. Underneath is the waistcoat, often just as elaborate, and underneath that, the shirt. The layers trap heat and sweat. The cravat tied around the neck is stiff and restrictive. And then there is the wig. the wigs are perhaps the most absurd element of male fashion at Versailles. They are enormous, cascading down past the shoulders in waves of curls. They are made of human hair, horsehair, or sometimes plant fibers, all of it woven together and set with pomade and powder. The powder is white or grey, and it gets everywhere, on your clothes, your hands, your face. It has a distinctive smell, slightly acrid. The wigs are hot and heavy. They sit on your head like a weight, pressing down on your skull, making your neck ache. In summer, the heat beneath the wig is unbearable. Men sweat, and the sweat soaks into the wig, mixing with the pomade, creating a damp, greasy mass that smells of scalp and tallow. The wigs also itch constantly. Beneath the wig, your own hair is cropped short or shaved, and the scalp gets irritated. Lice are a constant problem. Despite the best efforts of wig makers and valets, lice infest the wigs, and from there they spread. Men carry small combs or picks, which they use to try to dislodge the lice, but it is a losing battle. Everyone has lice. It is simply accepted. Fleas are equally common. The palace is full of them. They live in the fabric of the furniture, the tapestries on the walls, the bedding, the clothing. They bite incessantly. Courtiers develop a characteristic gesture, a discreet brushing or scratching, trying to dislodge the fleas without being too obvious. Special traps are sold, small ivory or wooden tubes worn on the body, designed to attract fleas and trap them. They are only partially effective. In winter, the clothing provides some warmth, but not enough. Versailles is cold. The rooms are vast and drafty. The windows, for all their size, do not seal well. Fireplaces provide some heat, but they are inefficient. You sit close to the fire and roast on one side while freezing on the other. The corridors are even colder. Walking from one part of the palace to another in winter is genuinely unpleasant. Your breath fogs in the air. Your fingers and toes go numb. The clothing helps, but it is not designed for warmth. It is designed for appearance. Let us turn now to the matter of food, which is more complex and more unpleasant than you might expect. The king eats well. Louis XIV has an enormous appetite, and he is served elaborate meals throughout the day. The royal kitchens are staffed by dozens of cooks, each specializing in particular dishes. The food is rich, heavy, laden with butter and cream and rich sauces. Roasted meats, game birds, fish, delicate pastries, fruits, jellies, ices. The variety is astonishing. The king eats with gusto, consuming quantities that would make most people sick. But the food, as mentioned earlier, often arrives cold. The kitchens are far from the king's apartments, and there is no good way to keep food hot during the journey. Servants carry the dishes through long corridors, and by the time they arrive, the food has cooled. The king does not seem to mind. He eats it anyway. For the courtiers, the situation is much less pleasant. Unless you are hosting a meal in your own apartments, which requires significant expense, you do not have regular access to good food. The king does not provide meals for the court as a matter of course. There is no communal dining. If you are invited to a particular event where food is served, you are fortunate. But those invitations are not predictable. Many courtiers go hungry. They simply cannot afford to eat well. Maintaining appearances at Versailles is expensive. You must have the right clothing, the right accessories, the right wig or hairstyle. You must maintain servants, at least a few, because appearing without servants is a sign of poverty. You must gamble, or at least appear to gamble, because it is expected. All of this costs money, and many noble families are not wealthy in cash terms. They may have estates, land, titles, but those things do not always generate liquid income, especially when the estates are poorly managed or when they have been divided among many heirs over generations. So courtiers economize where they can, and often that means food. They eat bread, cheese, cheap wine. They skip meals. They borrow money, go into debt, beg for pensions or grants from the king. The competition for royal pensions is fierce, because a pension can mean the difference between survival and complete financial ruin. But pensions are granted at the king's pleasure, and they can be revoked just as easily. You must constantly prove your loyalty, your usefulness, your devotion. The food that is available in the palace's more public spaces is often questionable. There are vendors, people who sell food in the courtyards and corridors, bread, sausages, pastries, roasted chestnuts. But the quality is variable and the sanitation is poor. People get sick from eating spoiled food, but they eat it anyway because they have no other option. For those who can afford it, there are also cabarets and inns in the town of Versailles itself, which has grown up around the palace. You can go there for a meal, though leaving the palace during the day risks missing something important, some ceremony or event where your absence will be noted. So most people stay and they make do with whatever they can find. Drinking water is another problem. There is no safe, reliable source of drinking water at Versailles. The water from the wells and fountains is often contaminated. People know, on some level, that the water can make you sick, though they do not understand the microbiology behind it. So they drink wine, beer, or other alcoholic beverages instead. These are safer because the alcohol kills some of the bacteria, though again, no one at the time understands why. They just know that drinking water makes you ill, and drinking wine does not, or at least not as often. This means that people are drinking alcohol throughout the day, not to excess usually, but constantly. A light wine with breakfast if you have breakfast. Wine at dinner. Wine in the evening. It is diluted sometimes, mixed with water to make it safer, but it is still alcohol. This contributes to the general fog of fatigue and discomfort that pervades life at Versailles. Now let us consider the social dynamics, the constant competition, the exhausting need to navigate relationships and hierarchies. Versailles is not a community in any meaningful sense. It is a collection of individuals and families, all competing for the same limited resources, the king's attention, favor, and generosity. There is very little genuine solidarity. Alliances are temporary, strategic, and often betrayed when a better opportunity arises. Every interaction is calculated. When you speak to someone, you are thinking about what they can do for you, what you can offer them, how the conversation might be reported to others. Sincerity is rare and often dangerous. Revealing your true thoughts or feelings can be used against you. So people wear masks, social and emotional, just as they wear their elaborate clothing. The face you show the world is a performance. Gossip is the currency of Versailles. Information is power. Knowing who is in favor, who is out of favor, who is sleeping with whom, who is plotting what. All of this is valuable. Courtiers spend hours each day gathering and trading gossip, sitting in small groups in apartments or corners of the palace, whispering, speculating, spreading rumors. The rumors can be vicious. Reputations are destroyed by whispers. a suggestion of financial impropriety, a hint of sexual scandal, a rumor of disloyalty. Any of these can ruin someone. And the rumors spread fast because there is nothing else to do, no other entertainment that does not cost money or require the king's permission. So people talk and they listen and they repeat what they hear, often embellishing it in the process. Women, in particular, are vulnerable to sexual gossip. A woman's reputation is fragile, easily destroyed. If there is even a hint that she has been unfaithful or that she has behaved improperly, it can follow her for life. And yet, affairs are common at Versailles. The king himself has mistresses, openly acknowledged, and this sets a tone. Many courtiers have lovers, conduct discreet or not so discreet affairs. But the rules are different for men and women. A man's affair might be overlooked or even admired. A woman's affair can destroy her. Marriages at this level of society are not about love. They are about alliances, about property and titles and bloodlines. People marry for strategic reasons, to unite families, to secure inheritances, to advance careers. Love, if it comes at all, is accidental. Many couples live essentially separate lives, maintaining the appearance of a marriage, but having little to do with each other outside of public occasions. Some are more successful, finding companionship or at least mutual respect, but it is not common. Children are often raised by servants, seeing their parents infrequently. This is partly practical. Parents are too busy with court obligations to spend much time with their children, and partly cultural. Childhood, in this era, is not sentimentalized the way it will be in later centuries. Children are small adults, expected to learn the rules and behaviors of their class as soon as they are able. They are dressed in miniature versions of adult clothing, complete with corsets for girls and wigs for boys. They are taught to bow, to curtsy, to speak properly, to dance, to comport themselves in public. Affection is often withheld, seen as a weakness that might spoil the child. The pressure on children at Versailles is intense. They must learn the etiquette, the endless rules, the complex social hierarchies. They must be seen and not heard, must behave perfectly in public, must never embarrass their families. Mistakes are punished, sometimes harshly. And they are aware, from an early age, that their value lies in what they can contribute to the family's status and fortune. Daughters are assets to be married off advantageously. Sons must secure military commissions, court positions, or other markers of success. The education of noble children is rigorous in some ways and lacking in others. They learn languages, Latin, Italian, Spanish, sometimes others. They learn history, at least the version of history that glorifies the monarchy and the French nobility. They learn music, dancing, riding, fencing for the boys. But practical skills, the kind of things that would help them manage estates or finances, are often neglected. These are seen as beneath them, tasks to be handled by stewards and accountants. The result is that many young nobles arrive at court ill-prepared for the realities they face. They have been taught to value honor, courage, and loyalty, but they find themselves in an environment where those virtues are often liabilities. Success at Versailles requires cunning, patience, and a willingness to bend or break the ideals they were raised with. Let us talk about the women of Versailles in more detail, because their experience is distinct and, in many ways, even more constrained than that of the men. Women at Versailles have very little power in any formal sense. They cannot hold most official positions, They cannot inherit titles in their own right, except in rare cases. Their primary roles are to marry well, produce heirs, and maintain the social fabric of the court through conversation, hosting, and setting fashion trends. But within these narrow confines, some women wield considerable influence. The king's mistresses, in particular, can be extraordinarily powerful. Madame de Montespan, one of Louis XIV's most famous mistresses, dominates the court for years. She lives in apartments adjacent to the king's, bears him multiple children, and has a say in appointments and policy. Courtiers seek her favor almost as eagerly as they seek the king's, because she can whisper in his ear, can advance or block careers with a word. But the position of royal mistress is precarious. Favor can be withdrawn at any moment. As Madame de Montespan ages, she is gradually replaced in the king's affections by other women. She clings to her position, tries to maintain her influence, but eventually she is pushed aside. She ends her life in a convent, supported by a pension, but stripped of her former glory. Other women find different paths to influence. Some become confidants, friends, or advisors to powerful men. Some host salons in their apartments, creating spaces where intellectuals, artists, and politicians gather to talk. These salons are important cultural institutions, places where ideas are exchanged and reputations are made. But hosting a successful salon requires money, charm, intelligence, and time, all of which are in short supply for most women at Versailles. For the majority of women at court, life is a daily grind of appearances and obligations. They must dress perfectly, always. A woman's clothing is even more scrutinized than a man's. The cut of a gown, the choice of fabric, the styling of hair, all of it sends messages about taste, wealth, and connections. And fashion changes constantly, driven by the whims of the king's mistresses or other influential women. A gown that is fashionable one season is hopelessly outdated the next. Keeping up is expensive, exhausting, and never-ending. Women must also manage their reputations with extreme care. As mentioned, sexual gossip can be devastating. But women are also judged on their wit, their conversation, their ability to entertain and charm. A woman who is too quiet is dismissed as dull. A woman who is too outspoken is criticized as immodest. The line is narrow, and it shifts depending on the audience. Childbirth, as we have touched on, is dangerous and often traumatic. Women are expected to produce heirs, and they are judged harshly if they fail to do so. But pregnancy and childbirth in this era are perilous. Medical knowledge is limited. Doctors do not understand the importance of sanitation. Instruments used in difficult births are not sterilized. Infection is common. Hemorrhage is common. Many women die in childbirth, and many more are left with permanent injuries, prolapsed uteruses, fistulas, chronic pain. And yet, women are expected to go through this repeatedly. Large families are the norm, and contraception is unreliable and often forbidden by the church. Women have child after child, each pregnancy taking a toll on their bodies until they are worn out or dead. Even if they survive, the emotional toll is considerable. Infant mortality is high, and many women lose multiple children. They are expected to grieve, but not too much, and not for too long. Life goes on. The court goes on. For unmarried women, the situation is different but no easier. If you are a young woman at Versailles, your primary goal is to find a husband, but you have little control over this process. Marriages are arranged by families, negotiated like business deals. Your preferences, if you have any, are largely irrelevant. You might be married to a man you have never met, someone much older, someone you find distasteful. It does not matter. The marriage serves the family's interests, and you are expected to go along with it. If you fail to marry, your options are limited. You might remain in your family's household, a permanent dependent, helping to raise your siblings' children, managing domestic affairs. Or you might enter a convent, which is often the fate of younger daughters for whom no suitable marriage can be arranged. Life in a convent is, in many ways, more peaceful than life at Versailles. But it is also a form of exile, a shutting away from the world. Let us turn now to the question of power and how it operates at Versailles. On the surface, power seems simple. The king has it, and everyone else does not. Louis XIV is an absolute monarch, at least in theory. His word is law. He can grant or revoke titles, confiscate estates, imprison people without trial, even order executions. The famous phrase, "L'État, c'est moi," I am the state, is often attributed to him. And whether he actually said it or not, it captures the essence of his rule. But in practice, power at Versailles is more complicated. The king cannot be everywhere, cannot manage every detail of government personally. He relies on ministers, advisors, and officials to carry out his policies. These men, and they are all men, wield considerable power in their own right. They control access to the king, manage information, draft policies, and make decisions that affect the entire kingdom. The most important of these officials is the Controller General of Finances, the man responsible for managing the kingdom's money. France in this era is almost constantly at war, and wars are expensive. The Controller General must find ways to pay for armies, navies, fortifications, and the immense costs of the court itself. This means raising taxes, borrowing money, and coming up with creative financial schemes, some of which work and some of which do not. The office is demanding and often thankless. Controllers General are blamed when things go wrong, when taxes rise, or when the kingdom teeters on the edge of bankruptcy. Several of them are dismissed or disgraced. But the position also offers opportunities for those who can navigate its challenges. A successful Controller General can become immensely wealthy and influential. Other ministers manage foreign affairs, war, the navy, and various domestic matters. They compete with each other for the king's attention and favor, forming factions, allying with courtiers, and maneuvering for advantage. The king encourages this competition, using it to maintain control, by keeping his ministers suspicious of each other, by never allowing any one person to become too powerful. He ensures that ultimate authority remains with him. But the king is not infallible. He makes mistakes, listens to bad advice, pursues policies that are costly or counterproductive. His wars, for example, drain the kingdom's resources and achieve mixed results. His revocation of the Edict of Nantes in 1685, which strips French Protestants of their religious freedoms and forces many to flee the country, is economically and socially damaging. Historians still debate the wisdom of his policies, but at the time, questioning the king is dangerous. For courtiers, navigating this world of ministers and royal favor is a constant challenge. You must figure out who has the king's ear, who is rising, who is falling. You must cultivate relationships with the right people, offer your services, demonstrate your usefulness. But you must also be careful not to align yourself too closely with any one faction, because factions fall, and when they do, everyone associated with them suffers. The king's favor is everything, but it is also maddeningly unpredictable. Louis XIV is not a warm man. He is polite, controlled, and reserved. He rarely shows emotion in public. His face is a mask, his words carefully chosen. He does not explain his decisions. If you fall out of favor, you might never know why. One day you are invited to the lever, included in hunts, spoken to at the apartment. The next day, you are ignored. The king looks through you as if you do not exist. It is a form of social death, and it can happen without warning. There are countless stories of courtiers destroyed by the loss of royal favor. A man who offends the king, even inadvertently, might find himself exiled to his estates, forbidden to return to Versailles. This is not a formal punishment, not a trial or a sentence. It is simply a withdrawal of permission to attend court. But the effect is devastating. Without access to Versailles, you cannot pursue your interests, cannot compete for positions or pensions, cannot marry off your children advantageously. You are cut off, isolated, forgotten. And exile to your estates is not the rural idyll it might sound like. Many noble estates are in remote parts of France, far from Paris and Versailles. They are often poorly managed, run down, unprofitable. Life there is dull, provincial, and uncomfortable. The local society is limited. There is little to do, no entertainment, no intellectual stimulation. For someone who has spent years at Versailles, it is a form of imprisonment. Some exiles spend years trying to regain the king's favor. They write letters, send gifts, plead through intermediaries. Some succeed, earning their way back into the king's good graces. Others never do. They die in exile, their children inheriting not just estates, but also the stain of royal disfavor. The king's control extends even to the most personal aspects of life. Marriages among the high nobility require the king's permission. If you wish to marry, you must seek his approval. He can refuse, or he can delay, or he can suggest an alternative match that serves his interests rather than yours. Most people comply, because defying the king is unthinkable. The king also controls military commissions, appointments to profitable positions, and the granting of pensions. These are the rewards that make life at Versailles bearable, the prizes that everyone competes for. But they are granted at the king's pleasure, and they can be taken away just as easily. A pension might be revoked if you fall out of favor. A commission might go to someone else's son, someone who has served the king better or more recently. This creates an atmosphere of constant anxiety. You are never secure. No matter how high you rise, no matter how much favor you enjoy, it can all be lost. And so you keep competing, keep performing, keep trying to please the king. Because to stop is to fall behind, and to fall behind is to disappear. Let us consider the experience of time at Versailles, because it is one of the most oppressive aspects of life there. Time at Versailles is not your own. Your day is structured around the king's schedule, which is rigid and unvarying. The lever happens at the same time every day. Meals happen at the same times. The apartment, the cowsher, all of it follows a predictable pattern. This might sound comforting, but it is actually suffocating. There is no flexibility, no freedom to decide how you will spend your day. You must conform to the rhythm of the court, whether it suits you or not. And the rhythm is exhausting. The days are long, the schedule relentless. There is very little time for rest or solitude. You are always on, always performing, always aware that you are being watched. Even when you retreat to your apartments, You are not truly alone. Servants are there, and they talk. Visitors might arrive. You cannot fully relax. The seasons blur together. One day is much like another. The ceremonies repeat endlessly, a cycle that never changes. After months or years at Versailles, time starts to feel strange, compressed or stretched, depending on the moment. The days drag, filled with tedium and discomfort. But the weeks and months seem to vanish, because nothing really changes. You wake, you dress, you attend the lever, you stand in corridors, you watch the king eat, you gamble or dance or gossip, you attend the coucher, you sleep, and then you do it again. There are moments of variety, of course. Festivals and celebrations break up the monotony. The king loves spectacles, elaborate parties, theatrical performances, fireworks displays. These are astonishing events, expensive and carefully choreographed, designed to amaze and impress. They do, but they are also exhausting to attend, often lasting late into the night or even until dawn. And afterward, you return to the same routine. Hunting provides some variety for men, at least. The king hunts several times a week, and it is one of the few activities that takes place outside the palace, in the surrounding forests. The hunts are opportunities to escape the confines of Versailles, to breathe fresh air, to experience something other than marble and gilt. But they are also physically demanding, and not everyone enjoys them. Still, attendance is expected if you are invited, because it is a sign of favor. For women, there are fewer opportunities to escape. They walk in the gardens, they visit each other's apartments, they attend the entertainments. But their world is smaller, more circumscribed. They cannot go hunting. They cannot travel freely. They are more trapped even than the men. The monotony is broken occasionally by scandal or drama. An affair is discovered. A duel is fought, though dueling is officially forbidden. Someone falls from favor spectacularly. These events become the talk of the court, discussed endlessly, analyzed from every angle. They are entertainment in their own right, a break from the tedium. But the tedium always returns. And over time, it wears people down. You see it in their faces, in the way they move. The younger courtiers arrive bright-eyed, eager, convinced that they will succeed where others have failed. But after a few years, they begin to look tired. The constant performance, the constant anxiety, the constant competition, it takes a toll. People age quickly at Versailles. They become cynical, bitter, or simply numb. Some people try to escape. They invent excuses to return to their estates, a sick relative, business that requires attention. The king sometimes grants permission, though he is suspicious of those who want to leave. Why would you want to be anywhere other than in his presence? The very desire to leave is seen as a sign of disloyalty or ingratitude. Those who do manage to leave often find that they cannot stay away. Their affairs at court require attention. Their rivals are there, advancing their own interests. If you are gone too long, you are forgotten, and returning becomes harder. So people come back, even when they desperately want to stay away. Now let us discuss some of the specific rituals and rules of etiquette, because they are central to the experience of Versailles, and they are often bizarre. Etiquette at Versailles is not intuitive. It is a learned code, full of seemingly arbitrary rules that must be memorized and followed exactly. Breaking the rules, even through ignorance, is a serious social error. It marks you as ignorant, provincial, unworthy of being at court. One of the most important rules concerns precedence, Who walks first? Who sits where? Who speaks when? Precedence is determined by a complex hierarchy based on birth, titles, and royal favour. Princes of the blood outrank dukes, dukes outrank marquises, and so on. But there are countless exceptions and special cases. A particular family might have an ancient privilege that gives them precedence in certain situations. A royal mistress might be granted honours that override the usual rules. Navigating precedence is a minefield. You must know where you stand in relation to everyone else, and you must behave accordingly. If you are of lower rank, you defer to those above you. You let them enter a room first. You do not sit in their presence unless invited. You do not speak unless spoken to. If you are of higher rank, you expect these courtesies, and you notice when they are not offered. Disputes over precedence are common and can become bitter. Two families might argue for years over who has the right to sit closer to the king at a particular ceremony. These disputes seem petty from the outside, but at Versailles, they matter. Precedence is a visible marker of status, and status is everything. The rules about who may sit in the king's presence are particularly strict. Most people must stand, always. Only the highest-ranking women, princesses and duchesses, are granted the privilege of sitting on a particular type of stool, called a tabouret, in the royal presence. This privilege is so important that women fight for it, petition for it, treasure it. To be granted the tabouret is a mark of immense status. Men, with rare exceptions, stand, always, for hours, during ceremonies, during the king's meals, during entertainments. Your legs ache, your back aches, but you stand because that is the rule. The king, of course, sits whenever he likes. The rules about hats are equally complex. Men wear hats as part of their formal attire, but they must remove them in the king's presence. Except sometimes they don't. There are specific occasions when certain men of certain ranks are permitted to keep their hats on, as a mark of privilege. Knowing when to remove your hat and when to keep it on requires deep knowledge of court etiquette. Women do not wear hats in the same way, but they have their own set of rules about headdresses, hair ornaments, and fans. The fan is an essential accessory, used not just for cooling, but for communication. The way you hold your fan, how you open or close it, which hand you carry it in, all of these can send signals. A language of fans develops, a silent code that women use to flirt, to signal interest or disinterest, to gossip without words. Bowing and curtsying are also strictly regulated. The depth of your bow, the duration, the exact posture, all of it varies depending on who you are bowing to and the context. A bow to the king must be deep, respectful, held for a specific moment. A bow to a peer might be shallower, briefer. Getting it wrong is embarrassing and marks you as unsophisticated. There are rules about knocking on doors, or rather not knocking. At Versailles, you do not knock. Instead, you scratch lightly on the door with your fingernail. This is the accepted way to signal your presence. Knocking is considered rude, too loud, too assertive. There are rules about how you walk, how you carry yourself. Women must glide, moving smoothly despite the heavy skirts and high heels. Men must walk with confidence, but not arrogance. Posture must be upright, shoulders back, head held at the correct angle. You are always visible, always watched, and your body language is constantly being read and judged. Conversation, too, is governed by rules. There are topics that are appropriate and topics that are not. Religion and philosophy can be discussed, but carefully, avoiding anything that might be seen as heretical or subversive. Politics can be discussed, but only in ways that support the king and his policies. Criticism, even mild criticism, is dangerous. Compliments are essential. You must praise the king, constantly and lavishly. You must admire his taste, his judgment, his accomplishments. You must compliment other courtiers as well, though more carefully. A compliment can be a weapon, used to flatter someone you need something from, or to mock someone subtly, if phrased with the right irony. Insults are never direct. Open rudeness is rare, because it is too risky. Instead, insults are delivered through insinuation, through faint praise, through pointed silences. The courtiers become expert at this kind of verbal fencing, delivering cuts so subtle that the victim might not realize they have been insulted until later, when they replay the conversation in their mind. Laughter is complicated. You must laugh at the king's jokes, always, even if they are not funny. But your laughter must sound genuine, not forced. The king is not a fool. He knows when people are laughing out of obligation rather than amusement. But not laughing is worse. So you learn to laugh on cue, to find humor in whatever the king finds humorous. Silence is also important. There are times when you must be silent, when speaking would be inappropriate or dangerous. Learning when to speak and when to remain silent is one of the most important skills at Versailles. All of these rules, these rituals, these tiny gestures and postures, they create an environment that is constantly stressful. You are never off duty. You are always performing, always aware of the rules, always monitoring yourself and others. It is exhausting in a way that is hard to describe. The physical exhaustion of standing for hours, of wearing uncomfortable clothes, is bad enough. But the mental and emotional exhaustion is worse. The constant vigilance, the constant calculation, the constant fear of making a mistake, it grinds people down. Let us talk now about money, because financial anxiety is one of the defining features of life at Versailles for most courtiers. Being at Versailles is expensive. You must maintain a certain level of display. Your clothing must be fine, updated regularly to keep up with fashion. Your servants must be numerous enough, well-dressed enough, to reflect your status. Your apartments, however small, must be furnished and decorated appropriately. You must gamble, or at least appear to gamble, because gambling is a major social activity. You must give gifts, particularly to those whose favor you seek. You must host occasionally, providing refreshments and entertainment. All of this costs money, a great deal of money. But most nobles do not have much cash. Their wealth is tied up in land, in estates that may or may not be profitable. Managing an estate from a distance while living at Versailles is difficult. Stewards and bailiffs handle the day-to-day operations, but they are not always honest or competent. Income from estates can be irregular, delayed, or simply insufficient. Many courtiers go into debt. They borrow from moneylenders, often at exorbitant interest rates. They borrow from each other, creating webs of mutual obligation and resentment. They delay paying their servants, their tailors, their other creditors. Some creditors are patient, knowing that a noble who comes into favor might suddenly have access to royal funds and be able to pay his debts. But others are not, and there are periodic scandals when a nobleman's debts become public, damaging his reputation. The king does provide some financial support, but it is inconsistent and unreliable. Royal pensions are granted to favoured courtiers, but the amounts vary and they are not guaranteed. A pension might be granted 1 year and revoked the next, or it might simply not be paid because the royal treasury is empty. France is often at war, and wars consume vast sums. The king's own expenses, building projects, entertainments, mistresses, the cost of maintaining Versailles itself are enormous. There is never enough money, and courtiers compete desperately for what little is available. Some courtiers find creative ways to make money. They accept bribes, selling their influence or access. If you have the king's ear, or if you are close to someone who does, people will pay you to advocate for them. This is technically corruption, but it is so common that it is almost accepted. Everyone does it, or at least everyone who can. Others engage in business ventures, though this is tricky. Nobles are not supposed to engage in trade or commerce. It is considered beneath their dignity. But some do it anyway, discreetly, investing in merchant ventures or manufacturing enterprises. The profits can be substantial, but the social risk is real. If it becomes known that you are involved in trade, you might be mocked or looked down upon. Women have fewer options. They cannot hold official positions or receive pensions in their own right, except in rare cases. They are dependent on their husbands, fathers, or brothers for money. If a woman is widowed, she might receive a portion of her husband's estate, but often these portions are small, and she must live frugally or rely on the charity of relatives. Some widows become impoverished, their status at court maintained only by the fading memory of their former position. The financial pressure contributes to the overall atmosphere of anxiety at Versailles. You are constantly aware of money, or the lack of it. You are constantly calculating, trying to stretch your resources, looking for opportunities to improve your financial situation. And you are surrounded by people doing the same thing, all of you competing for the same limited pool of royal generosity. The contrast between appearance and reality is stark. People dressed in silks and jewels are sometimes days away from financial collapse. They smile and laugh and gamble as if they have not a care in the world, while in private they are frantic, trying to figure out how to pay their debts, how to afford the next season's wardrobe, how to keep up the facade. And the facade must be maintained, because to admit poverty is to lose status, and to lose status is to lose everything. So people lie, they borrow, they cheat, they scheme, all to maintain the illusion that they are thriving. Let us consider now the matter of religion, because it is woven into the fabric of daily life at Versailles in ways that are both genuine and performative. Louis XIV is a devout Catholic, or at least he becomes more devout as he ages. In his youth, he is less concerned with religious observance, but later in life, particularly after his secret marriage to Madame de Maintenon, a pious and conservative woman, he becomes more strictly observant. He attends Mass daily, observes fasts and holy days, and expects his court to do the same. Religion at Versailles is both a private matter and a public spectacle. The king's daily mass is a ceremony attended by courtiers. The royal chapel is a magnificent space, and the services are elaborate, with music, incense, and ritual. Attending mass is expected, another obligation in the endless round of obligations. For some courtiers, religious observance is genuine. They are sincere in their faith, finding comfort or meaning in the rituals of the church. For others, it is purely performative, another box to check, another way to demonstrate loyalty and conformity. You attend Mass because the king attends Mass, and because not attending would be noticed. The king's increasing piety creates new pressures. He becomes less tolerant of moral laxity, less amused by the sexual escapades and scandalous behavior that were once overlooked. Affairs continue, of course, but they are conducted more discreetly. Courtiers who are known for loose morals find themselves out of favor. The atmosphere becomes more restrained, more judgmental. The revocation of the Edict of Nantes in 1685 is a turning point. The edict, granted by Henry IV nearly a century earlier, had allowed French Protestants, known as Huguenots, to practice their religion. Louis XIV revokes it, declaring that Protestantism is no longer tolerated in France. Protestants must convert to Catholicism or leave the country. Many choose to leave, fleeing to England, the Netherlands, Prussia, and other Protestant countries. France loses skilled artisans, merchants, and intellectuals, a brain drain that damages the economy. At Versailles, there is no room for religious dissent. You are Catholic, or you pretend to be. Any hint of Protestant sympathies is dangerous. People who were once open about their faith convert, sometimes sincerely, often out of necessity. Those who refuse are exiled or worse. The king's piety also affects the tone of entertainments. In his later years, he is less interested in the risque comedies and ballets that once delighted him. He prefers more serious fare, religious music, tragedies with moral lessons. The court adapts, because the court always adapts. The entertainments become more somber, more edifying, less fun. For courtiers trying to navigate this environment, religion becomes one more thing to manage, one more performance. You must appear devout, but not excessively so. Too much piety might seem like criticism of those who are less devout, including potentially the king himself in his younger days. Too little piety marks you as irreligious, possibly even dangerous. As with everything at Versailles, the balance is delicate. Priests and confessors are important figures at court. They hear confessions, offer spiritual guidance, and inevitably gather information. What people confess in the privacy of the confessional is supposed to be secret, but secrets at Versailles have a way of leaking. Courtiers are cautious about what they reveal, even to their confessors. Religious observance also provides some structure and comfort. The rhythm of the church calendar, the cycle of feasts and fasts, offers a sense of continuity and meaning that the secular rituals of the court cannot fully provide. For some people, religious faith is a refuge, a source of strength in an environment that is otherwise alienating and exhausting. But for others, the enforced religiosity is just one more burden, one more demand on their time and energy, one more way in which their lives are not their own. Let us turn finally to the question of why anyone would choose to live this way, why people fight so desperately for the privilege of being trapped at Versailles. The answer is complicated, rooted in the social and political structures of the time. For the French nobility, proximity to the king is the only real source of power and status. If you are not at court, you are irrelevant. Your estates might be vast, your lineage ancient, but without access to the king, you cannot advance your interests, cannot secure positions for your children, cannot protect your family's fortune. Louis XIV has deliberately created this system. By concentrating the nobility at Versailles, by making his favor the only thing that matters, he has neutered potential rivals. In previous generations, great nobles could raise armies, challenge royal authority, even foment civil war. The Fronde, a series of rebellions during Louis XIV's childhood, nearly toppled the monarchy. Louis remembers this. His entire system of government is designed to prevent it from happening again. By keeping the nobles at Versailles, he keeps them under his eye. They compete with each other instead of uniting against him. They spend their energy on rituals and etiquette instead of plotting rebellion. They bankrupt themselves trying to maintain appearances, making them dependent on royal pensions and unable to finance military adventures. It is a brilliant, ruthless system of control. And it works. The French nobility, once dangerous and independent, becomes ornamental. They are reduced to courtiers, their lives consumed by the trivial and the ceremonial. They are trapped, but many of them do not fully realize it, or they cannot admit it, because to admit it would be to acknowledge that their lives are meaningless. There is also the allure of Versailles itself. Despite everything, it is magnificent. The palace is beautiful, the gardens are stunning, the entertainments are world-class. There is a seductiveness to it, a glamour that is hard to resist. To be at Versailles is to be at the center of the world, or at least the center of the French world. It is where things happen, where history is made, where the most talented and powerful people gather. For young nobles arriving at court for the first time, Versailles is dazzling. The wealth, the art, the music, the sheer scale of it all, it is overwhelming. They are awed, excited, eager to prove themselves. They believe that they will succeed, that they will rise, that they will become favorites of the king. And some do, for a time. But most do not. Most disappear into the crowd, spending years or decades in the background, waiting for opportunities that never come. There is also the matter of identity. For the nobility, status is everything. It defines who you are, how you see yourself, how others see you. To be excluded from Versailles is to lose that identity, to become nothing. So people cling to their place at court, even when it makes them miserable, because they cannot imagine being anyone other than who they are. And there is, for some, a genuine loyalty to the king. Louis XIV inspires devotion, at least among some of his subjects. He is charismatic, in his way, dignified and commanding. He embodies the monarchy, represents France, and many people feel a deep, almost religious loyalty to him. Serving him, being in his presence, is seen as an honor, a duty, a privilege. For these people, the hardships of Versailles are worth it, because they are serving their king and their country. But for many others, the loyalty is performative, a mask worn out of necessity. They resent the king, resent the system, resent the waste and the absurdity of it all. But they cannot say so, cannot even fully admit it to themselves, because to do so would be dangerous and would undermine the entire structure of their lives. So they stay. They wake up in their cramped apartments. They dress in their uncomfortable clothing. They stand in corridors for hours. They watch the king eat. They gamble away money they do not have. They smile and bow and flatter and scheme. They do it day after day, year after year, until they are old or sick or dead. And then their children take their place, and the cycle continues. Life at Versailles, then, is a kind of slow suffocation. It is beautiful and terrible, magnificent and miserable. It is a place where the highest aspirations of art and culture coexist with the most petty and degrading forms of competition. It is a triumph of architecture and landscape design. and it is also a machine for breaking human spirits. If you were there, if you lived through it, you would understand why it was a nightmare. Not because of any single horror, but because of the accumulation of small indignities, small discomforts, small humiliations, repeated endlessly. The lack of privacy, the lack of comfort, the lack of control over your own life, the constant performance, the constant judgment, the constant anxiety, the exhaustion, physical and emotional, the knowledge that it will never end, that this is your life now, and that there is no escape. And yet, from the outside, from a distance, Versailles looks like paradise. The paintings and engravings show elegant men and women in a palace of unimaginable beauty. They show gardens that seem like Eden, entertainments that seem like dreams. They do not show the smell, the dirt, the disease, the hunger, the fear, the tedium, the quiet desperation. This is the genius of Louis XIV's creation. It is a gilded cage, so beautiful that people do not realize they are imprisoned. Or if they do realize it, they convince themselves that the cage is where they want to be. And so Versailles endures throughout Louis XIV's long reign and beyond. It becomes the model for royal courts across Europe, imitated by kings and princes who want to recreate its splendor and its control. It shapes the culture, the politics, the social life of France for generations. But the cost is borne by the people who live there, the thousands of men and women who sacrifice their comfort, their freedom, their health, and sometimes their lives, all for the sake of being close to the sun, King. And as the evening light fades and the candles are lit once more in those vast halls, as another day ends and another begins, the cycle continues. The courtiers retire to their apartments, exhausted, to sleep briefly before waking to do it all again. The palace never rests, the system never stops, and the lives of those trapped within it continue day after day in a routine that is both magnificent and suffocating, glorious and nightmarish, until at last, mercifully, it ends. If you've stayed with me through this long journey into the gilded nightmare of Versailles, thank you. I hope you found something in it, perhaps a quiet fascination, perhaps a sense of relief that you live in a different time. If you enjoyed this story, consider leaving a like, and if you'd like to hear more tales from history's stranger corners, do subscribe. There are so many more stories waiting, so many more worlds to explore together. Until next time, rest well wherever you are.